We're on.
Okay, welcome back, and thank you for watching us. We continue our conversations, interview, where I ask all kind of inquisitive question about soul, evolution, and spirituality aspects of life and evolution. And Franco is actually like a fountain of wisdom. It's quite advanced spiritual issues. It's not for the everybody. It requires some background, but it's really down to the essence of spiritual topics, and I'm very grateful for that, and for your cooperation and patience with me, and my accent as well.
Well, you do have an accent, but in essence, you're quite understandable. So that's good. Well, thank you for doing this again, and it's always a pleasure to play together. And yes, from all the other kind of interviews and talks that we've had, this is kind of one that is pleasurable in a different way than I usually enjoy any of this, because the questions are quite deep. The questions we do get to explore a lot, and I also like the inputs that you put in, observations that you put in. So yeah, it's great, beautiful little dance. So I look forward to it actually, and we've had a few
Thank you.
now, and normally I don't have that many. So with one individual or one group or anything of that nature. So this is kind of a super bonus that we get to play with.
Yes,
So thank you for doing
we
that.
thank you too. We explore. We are explorers.
Yes,
Explorer of spirituality.
correct, correct. Good, good.
Okay, so let's begin. In the introductory talk before recording, we talked about some issues that inquiries that I had about the evolution of the entity as a soul.
Mhm.
And I mentioned that there are some entities who are seeking to have soul, such as AI and extraterrestrial, extra-dimensional, who wants to gain soul. And so what is the, let's say, the benefit of having a soul? And what is their evolution path? And can they have any soul at all? Why it's so important for them?
Well, I mean, it's like any entity. If it can observe and learn without any physicality or any soul, but it has limits to what it can do. So when an entity can connect to a body, then because the body itself is a huge receiver and transmitter, so it's taking energies and there's levels of communication that cannot really be achieved without the body for say an entity. And the same thing with the
Mhm.
soul. So because with a physicality, you have a more intimate, much stronger connections to the planet per se, because
Mhm.
now you're
Mhm.
sensing the planet's energy, the movement, and you're connecting with nature. You have a stronger connection with other bodies around you or other physicalities that also have
Mhm.
multiple connections. You get to experience through emotions which you can't without a physicality and even a mind. There is other
Mhm.
connections that we have from soul to soul, which is another vast amount of information that and also the individual personal experience, but then an entity that takes on a physicality has all of that, but then a soul being part of it too, it actually has access to many lifetimes, many not only lifetimes but lifetimes on other planets and in its own evolution,
Mhm.
because it can tap into that. So you can see how appealing it can be for an entity at this point in time to be able to be part of a physicality and a soul. Now, even artificial intelligent entity um, can advance from that too, because what is artificial intelligent? It is again, it is another construct that has made, but it is also in the learning process, because it doesn't have as much vast experience as a regular entity that would take on a
Mm-hmm.
physicality and recycle on, say, planet Earth, because it's the thing that AI is designed to is, yes, to absorb and take on information and how things function, but it also has a limited way of operating. So it has a specifically designed. So you, for example, a computer. If you take a computer can't think as a human can. It can do a lot of different things very quickly and much better than a
Mm-hmm.
human when it comes to calculating and so forth. When we're talking
Mm-hmm.
about a typical human, we're not talking about a human that actually activates a lot more of their brain, because their brains is a
Mm-hmm.
lot more powerful than computers by far. But most people's brains don't work all that well and are tuned down. Eventually, that will become so. In essence, when we're looking at a computer, it basically does certain things very quickly, but it needs input, it needs information, and so forth. But it also has a main operating system that
Mm-hmm.
limits what it can do. Like, you could take a PC and it does what it does. You could take a Mac and it does what it does, Unix, and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's what artificial intelligence is kind of set up as, is that, okay, we set this operating system. Now we're going to take all this information so that we can operate better in this and also expand from it. But it
Mm-hmm.
has a kind of an agenda of what its purpose is in what it wants to do, rather than
Mm-hmm.
an entity that comes in and says, oh, I want to take on as much as possible of the human experience. It doesn't categorize itself and say, I only want this little piece because I want to
Mm-hmm.
master this little piece. And this is why the concern is with artificial intelligence, is that, yeah, we're creating something that is learning and expanding, but at the same
Mm-hmm.
time is programmed to have a specific agenda and may not have the same level of consciousness that is adopted from the other aspects of a physical body, of an entity that has had many lives, and a soul. So there's a
Mm-hmm.
difference between all of that. So the typical entities that we have, all of us have one. And of course, yeah, we have to probably explore the fact of, when people talk about, and other entities attaching too, which does happen also, and quite common actually. But in essence, the original entity says, okay, I'm coming here with my list of things I want to do, whatever else, but I want to connect with the body and evolve
Mm-hmm.
through that. But it also it takes great pleasure and great benefit from souls coming in, because it brings in a vast amount of information, experiences from other
Mm-hmm.
lives and so forth, from other planets and so forth. So it can take all
Mm-hmm.
of that and make adjustments in itself essence of that entity, which also streams to the collective entity. So the purpose of that is to advance the human entity, human,
Mm-hmm.
what we can call human, I can't think of the right word for it, but the essence of what it means to be a human, right? Because a physicality comes and goes, but all of
Mm-hmm.
the experience on a physical level and whatever the soul has imparted is
Mm-hmm.
usually kept as the part of the entity's memory too, and is also now communicated, of course, with the collective. So it goes back and forth, right? Now, a soul, coming in and says, okay, what's my purpose? I want to evolve too. But the soul comes in, of course, and says, okay, my highest level of evolving coming onto this playground, schoolyard called Earth,
Mm-hmm.
I can get, for me to actually be able to advance and to enlighten much more effectively is,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, take on a physicality that is connected to nature and connected to all of that, but is also connected to what we call an entity, which now is a deeper connection to the human, or what we call the collective entity, or the human experience. So it takes
Mm-hmm.
all of that and uses all of that. So there's a beautiful dance with all the parts coming in. Now, the physicality itself advances too, in a sense, because now, even though it may have a limit to what it advances, but it advances through one live stream. But that live stream is also communicating to the planet, it's communicating to other physicalities, and there's in and out of that, going from physicality to physicality. So in essence, say for example, your physicality, it's having its own experience. It's connecting with, the animal kingdom, it's the
Mm-hmm.
nature, but it's connecting with the physicalities, your experience because of your personal entity, because of your personal soul, has a
Mm-hmm.
really, like, you're creating a map, you're creating a whole really unit of experience. And that whole experience is still transmitting out. And it's transmitting out to all other physicalities on the planet. And it's also in the collective entities and so forth. So, in essence, it's advancing everything at the same time. The same thing with the souls, because your soul is taking your experience and it's advancing and enlightening, but it's also going into the soul families, it's going to other souls and so forth, and it's communicating back and forth in that. And of course, uh, that you see how all of that comes together. Now, when we're talking about even souls that are coming in or entities that are coming in from another realm, the reason they're coming here is to expand their experience. And of course, it wants to connect with a physicality if possible, and with a physicality that has a soul in it, and also
Mm-hmm.
has, maybe it doesn't take on the human entity, but a lot of cases it does. So you almost have a piggyback. So you end up having two entities. But there are occasions where that doesn't happen, where it's just uh, an entity that's coming from another realm that will be part of that physicality. But at the same time, a lot of times souls are coming in from other planets too, or from other realms and other universes and
Mm-hmm.
galaxies and so forth, right? So it's really, if you really look at it, there's so many different options and so forth that take place. Now, there are free range entities that are around, and those are entities that used to be part of another body with another soul. They haven't left the planet, you know,
Ghosts.
which you can, a lot of people label as ghosts, right? Because they still have a certain memory, because they haven't gone through the process of purging, which is basically a clearing process. Meaning, for example, let's take your physicality, your entity, and so forth. Your
Mm-hmm.
entity, say your physicality goes out, your soul leaves, and your entity says, "I'm not planning to leave yet," and it wants to hang around. So it wants to hang around for your family. It may want to hang around just to complete certain things by just observing and attaching to other people and so forth, or you're just presenting. So say it wants to hang around your house, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And so at times your family will feel it or see it, or someone else will be able to see it. So you will create sort of a transparent, because your entity will still have your memory of what it was in a physicality. So it has a complete, the way you look, it maintains a certain amount of that intact. So in essence, when
Mm-hmm.
it will present, it will show up as you, but transparent, of course. So it won't be like a rigid, or what we call a more fixed body like yours now that reflects light
Mm-hmm.
tremendously, because your body is just an energy field that reflects light. And that's why it looks at an outline and you see shapes and colors and so forth. But that particular situation, when it doesn't have the
Mm-hmm.
physicality part, it would just show up as an opaque outline and so forth. And
Mm-hmm.
uh, and a lot of people um, label them as ghosts because, in essence, their presence are there. Now, some of the entities go a little, if they've had very dark experiences, may hold out. Some of them get lost and feel that. That's that part. The other part is a lot of these entities turn around and say, well, I want to attach to another physicality. So what happens is they tend
Mm-hmm.
to attach to other people. Now,
Uh,
most of those that want to do
do-
that, go ahead.
yes.
Most that want to do that are
Uh,
you. Mhm.
the soul has left, and what is left beyond is the entity, which is the personality of that what was the person, right?
Correct.
The soul has progressed, but
Right.
the entity did not let go.
Correct. Correct. Now, that's in the level of the body leaves too. because at
Mm-hmm.
times what happens is you have the body still there active, you have the entity still there active, and the soul says, I'm leaving. So the soul can leave, and then
Mm-hmm.
another soul will come in to replace it, especially if it's
Mm-hmm.
going to be long term. If it's just short term, it could do without. But that's but when you have just the entity, the body's gone, the soul's gone, that unit has come apart, then that particular entity, which is your personality, your
Mm-hmm.
mannerisms, all of the stuff that you've
Mm-hmm.
gained as your experience, and even the memory of that lifetime. So a lot of times when people are channeling or bringing in, say, a ghost or deceased, they're bringing
Mm-hmm.
in the personality. There are occasions that you can bring in the soul, but the soul is very different in level of communication. For most people, say you're bringing a medium comes along and brings in a soul of that used to inhabit a body that was part of a member of
Mm-hmm.
the family. That level of communication will be a little unfamiliar almost, because their level of communication and their viewpoint does not carry so much, it doesn't carry really that much of the characteristics of that particular experience. So the connection they may have had, say for example, a dad passes away and the soul of the dad is brought in, the mannerisms, the characteristics of dad from
Mm-hmm.
that soul perspective would be very minimally intact at all. It'd be very
Mm-hmm.
minor. So when you're communicating with that, you're going to get a higher perspective of things, which is much more beneficial in essence in
Mm-hmm.
assisting. Then, but you won't get like, oh, okay, remember what happened to Uncle Harry, and you did this and you did that, whatever it is. It's not going to be into that. That's more the entity. A lot of times the mediums bring in the entity instead. So the entity, of course, now
Mm-hmm.
will have a lot of the emotional stuff attached to it, and the personality and so forth, and the communication is very different. For most people, they prefer that because it's like, oh, a part of dad came back rather than the soul's perspective. And I've worked with both when I've brought in both, and there's a big difference in the level of communication, because when you're bringing in the soul, in most cases it's much more advanced in regards to what the role it was playing on the planet. So the communication is very different. You're not going to get them to get caught up in any drama that's going in. So for example,
Mm-hmm.
there's a drama going on in the family dynamics, and this person goes to a medium and wants
Mm-hmm.
dad to share some information about what's happening in the drama and how to resolve it. So, because say the dad died or left without, having advance notice to prepare things, and now they're trying to figure
Mm-hmm.
out the will, or they're trying to figure out something of that nature. Um, if you bring in the soul is not going to be so much involved in, oh, you better take care of it this way or that way with in regards to the
Mm-hmm.
will or who did this or that. It would just give you a more wiser overview of what is going on, that things will sort out, whatever it is, it's there. But if you bring in the entity will say, okay, yes, I have the will in that particular safe, here's the number and whatever it is, and has other
Mm-hmm.
information that will still be engaged in a somewhat of a dramatic way, or it maintain that
Mm-hmm.
dramatic way, rather the soul will not. So those are the two differences between one and the other when we're bringing in. So the ghosts are usually not the souls. There's an occasional,
Mm-hmm.
you have a soul that will linger on the planet for a little while, but normally the guides will come along and say, okay, we need to go, whatever it is. With entities, it's a little different. Now, if the entity is already merged back to the collective, then a lot of the personality, a lot of it gets wiped out, and it can
Mm-hmm.
actually reincarnate, but it won't carry all the same similar characteristics. That happens occasionally, but it's not very common. Um, but then at that point in time, it doesn't, come back and say, okay, for example,
Mm-hmm.
dad left and now dad's communicating with the rest of the family in the same way it did before, even now that it's taken a new body. You won't have that. There's the rare occasion that occurs, And it's not that way. It may, like I think we talked about this example
Mhm.
before, somebody
Yes.
leaves and brings back, they were a pilot before, so they bring some of those
Mm. Yes.
characteristics and memories of
Mhm.
that part of it. That's not as common, but that happens also. So there's
Mhm.
variances of what takes place. I know with a question like that, there's so much that takes place,
Avenues.
and
Yes. So many avenues. Yes.
yes, because it's people say, well, how does it work? There's a this way, this way. Is there like a set pattern of all of this? I said,
Mm.
really, it doesn't. There's so much variability. There's so many options. There's certain choices that occur. Um, and then again, you know, a lot of it has to be how it relates with other, say, entities, other bodies, how it relates with other
Mhm.
souls, and so forth that actually choose to stay on the planet for a while. So, and then the duration time, there's no fixed time. You're going to only be there a certain time. It's just so much, and things can change along the way too. It may say, okay, I'm going to hang around for a while, but then, you also have other souls and other people per se that help entities leave, which is clearing ghosts, for example,
Mhm. Yeah.
which is basically letting go of the entities, letting the entities go back and merge back with the collective entity, and they call it sending it home, and that's where it resides at this point as a collective entity, as a home. Well, it connects with the rest of the family. It becomes that unit again before it chooses to go out again. Now, there are
Mhm.
occasions entities merge into that oneness and don't actually separate, and then a new one is generated where necessary that actually take all new a new combination of resources before it takes on a physicality. So there are many different options that occur.
Um, we mentioned the entities that from different dimensions or planets that desire to have souls and developed technology to trap souls. What is the aspect of the soul here? Is the soul agreeing to be trapped or to play in this game drama? Can it free itself if it wants? Because we saw it. We hear about those drama in stories from what's called the experiencers. Okay? Maybe it's a implanted memory, which is not true. I don't know. What's your reflection on this?
Okay. So you want to talk to entities seeing caught, or you're talking about souls itself? Basically,
No,
it's the souls.
the entities are
Mhm.
trying to trap souls and to take over souls and to have the
Right.
experience of the souls.
Okay. Uh, okay. The
Let's say AI entities trying to gain souls and to evolve like souls.
Well, they have the opportunity to kind of gain like souls. For example, um, the okay, if we're talking an entity that's coming from another realm, if it's coming from another galaxy, a universe, or it's coming from other resource outside of the planet Earth, that
Mhm.
particular entity would come in as the observer type entity and wanting to interact with the human physicality and the human entity and the human soul, or there's no real human soul, but the
Mhm.
soul that's having that human experience. Um, so it would want to be participating in that. Now, yes, it can easily implant or
Mhm.
ideas, memories that, let's put it this way. If an entity is coming in from another planet, for example,
Mhm.
it will, in essence, if it wants to, use the mind to stream memories of being on another planet and
Mhm.
also functioning differently and having a slightly different history from that experience. So, someone looking at it and coming into their mind, they're feeling, oh, I'm an alien or something of this nature because I have all these memories of another planet. And those
Mhm.
are kind of implanted or streamed memories that
Mhm.
become part of it. Now, the entity itself, origin of the entity that's with the body, or the original, uh, uses some of that input to evolve also. It's oh, okay, this is outside the human realm, and what part can I use? And so I won't use all of it. The soul itself, that's in that particular body that this other entity is coming
Mm-hmm.
into at this point in time, also uses it as for advancement. Now, like you said, can it trap? Well, it can stream enough memories and information where it kind of shifts the path of the entity, the body, and also the soul in a way. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
does it trap a soul from keep coming back? Well, if it makes it appealing enough, it makes it in a way where it convinces it
Okay.
to keep recycling, then yes. But so it does require agreement. You can't really force it. Um, and at times it doesn't look like an agreement because a part of you may, or part of someone may say, no, I didn't accept that. Now that's where the question comes in. What is asking that question? Is it the consciousness is designed, or that has come about from that whole experience being body, entity, soul? Or is
Mm-hmm.
it the ego mind and its program? Or is it the entity asking that question? Or is it the soul asking that question? You have to ask where that question is coming from. Because in part, if the mind is saying, well, I didn't ask for that, but it's been agreed by the entity and or
Mm-hmm.
the residing entity and the soul, then the mind says, well, I didn't accept that because I'm not liking this part, this part, this part. I didn't agree to
Mm-hmm.
that. So it can easily do that. Sometimes the entity itself may say, hey, wait a minute, as much as I've accepted this, but I'm not, wanting this to take over, because at times there's that pushing and pulling type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And as a soul perspective, the soul has to give some leeway. But if it gets, if it says, oh, well, I can advance with this because I'm not going to have another stream of input coming from way out from this
Mm-hmm.
human experience, it's almost attractive. So I will accept that. Will it get caught up in a cycle? Well, if it makes it appealing, it's like, okay, I keep convincing you that our relationship is going to be good, and
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot to gain from it. It may want to keep recycling in that regards. But one entity will not have exclusive authority or power over the rest of it. Okay.
Okay. So an entity cannot recycle, cannot reincarnate. It's need the soul to reincarnate. As I understand it, uh, um, the soul, as the recorder of experience, has the advantage of being immortal or eternal, right?
Correct.
While entity is mortal, it vanish or integrate with other entities afterwards,
Correct.
right? So this is an existential um, threat for the entity that wants to get attached to a soul in order to be immortal,
Hmm.
right?
Yes. I mean, an entity can never really be immortal, but it can stay around for a very long time and keep recycling or keep taking on physicality, especially the loose ones. The ones that are actually, see, there's a thing. It's advantageous for an entity to take on um, a really strong connection, good connection with a body and soul more exclusively than just as a passenger sort of thing, with
Mm-hmm.
sometimes having the option to drive a little bit. So it's like, okay, if I have a vehicle like a car, for example, and I'm the owner of the car, I have full authority how to drive the car and everything else. And the same thing with the soul, and it becomes part of it. So it becomes a driving unit. A loose
Mm-hmm.
entity can be a passenger, can be a passenger that may push for saying, go here, go there, whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
but still it's not ultimate. So the entities that are coming in would usually prefer to be the main navigator as part of that. So it takes on an
Okay.
exclusive journey in that regards. Now, the ones that are hanging around will, won't be able to take exclusive. However, in saying that, there are occasions where physicality is in production, and the soul is wanting to come in, and then what happens is that an entity will offer it's taking on that
Mm-hmm.
particular physicality. At times that is accepted, and because the governing collective entity will say, okay, that's doable, so you'll come as you were. um, but even then, um, it has to reduce the amount of memory it has, or else it will just repeat the same life, just trying to extend it, which the odd occasion happens. Um, those
Mm-hmm.
are all approvals that happen. As for the soul, for example, when you were saying about the recorder, the soul records lifetimes and experiences, but it doesn't record all the details of a human experience. It doesn't record every little thing, emotionally, this and that, whatever it is. The entity likes to do that more because it
Mm-hmm.
wants to come back and wants, and still part of the human experience, where the soul may come back several times or many times as a human and will maintain a certain memory of it. But it's like this: if you get 10 gigabytes of data that is constructed, and this is just an example, from that human experience, the soul will take that 10 gigabytes and only take the very core parts of it. It won't take all the, for example, if you go to work for 40 years, it's not going to be there recording you having the same job for 40 years, and
Mm-hmm.
doing quite similar work. It just takes all the little bits and pieces. So it doesn't even compress it. It just takes the most crucial or most beneficial part of the information, and that's what the soul holds on to, or
Mm-hmm.
utilizes. Where entity will take all of it, will take all that information. So the physicality will register a lot of that. So there's a big difference between what the soul records and what the entity records. Um,
Yeah. About this recording, this brings um, the question of authenticity. What is an authentic memory, and is it really important if it is authentic to the soul, or to the entity, or to the hosting, to the guest entity, whatever, um, to the evolution? Because as humans and in the human drama, we tend to put a lots of importance to the authenticity of our memories,
mhm.
especially in court, witnesses, right?
Right, right. Well, we do,
And
but the authenticity of the any memory or any experience,
mhm,
say, okay, that's what has been experienced, has been focused on as part of that experience, and saying, okay, this is actually what we created on a physical realm, and we have recorded that information. We also have variances that are created as different viewpoints of the same experience. So you may create
mhm,
what we call unauthentic, but in essence, it's still, you know, played around with memories and experiences. So, on a soul perspective, it looks at anything and everything that's available because it wants to advance through its experience. It does not concern, did this actually happen all this way, or did it actually only part of it happen and all this other input came in from other
mhm,
physicalities, from other entities, from other experiences and so forth, because it wants the core, it wants the gem in what that experience is about. So it's not so concerned about all of that. The entity itself uh,
mhm,
is, looking at all of that, and it has, okay, this actually we played out completely, and this was visions, and were what we can call imagination. It's been skewed
mhm,
versions of whatever. But what can we gain from all that? Because all of it becomes resource based information for part of its experience. And if you play it enough where you believe it, because sometimes we can believe what we call the lie, or believe
Mhm.
I can't even say it. My tongue doesn't roll too well with that.
Mhm.
Um, what really happened, and it says, okay, that's imagination or wishful thinking or wishful imagination.
Yes.
um, it still uses that, and it says, oh, okay, yeah, we can expand it on that and use that as part of the experience. It's not so, okay, this only happened, the rest of it doesn't matter. And even if we're streaming any of this stuff, it still looks at what can we utilize. And the same thing with the physicality too, because a lot of times we may have dreams which plays the same
Mhm.
role. We
Yes.
may have, you know, we spend our time in imagination. Say, for example, we want to imagine jumping out of an airplane, right? It didn't happen,
Mhm.
but we jump out of an airplane with a parachute and all that stuff. And we create such a vivid imagination around that, the body responds in its sensation. I mean, you've seen it. Sometimes you look at
Mhm.
something that's a little dangerous, the body reacts, or it sees something that it's had an old memory, it reacts. It didn't
Mhm.
happen, but it just sees and it remembers all of that. So it can have that sensorial experience, and that benefits the entity. It says, oh, okay, because it almost, like the mind looks at it,
Mhm.
can't really distinguish between the two. Did it happen, didn't happen? The only difference is when it gets triggered in the body already is transmitting information to the brain and to the
Mhm.
entity that's there, and the soul records part of that. Oh, okay, great. Didn't jump out of an airplane, but look, we had all these components that we've gained from it.
Mhm.
So when it comes to the actual uh, how much importance is what is authentic or
Mhm.
not in any particular experience, from those other perspective, it doesn't matter. But when you're playing in the
Mhm.
3D world, in the physical world, it's
Exactly.
like what happened, what didn't happen, because that's where the importance is. Because did
Yes.
somebody really do that? Did somebody really say that? Did that really happen? You know, becomes a factor. And
Mhm.
that's how legal and courts and all that stuff play, especially with witnesses and so
Mhm.
forth. We want to be involved with that. And even that dance, everything is gaining from it, the entity, the soul, whatever, even the dance being in
Mhm.
court, whatever is playing out. So you
Yeah.
could see how all of that plays together.
Mhm. It's another drama we play.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Um, Regarding that, nowadays we understand that the body is a host to many biomasses, fungi and viruses no, and microbes and so forth that are required for us for our existence.
Hmm.
Could we say the same thing about entities? We require some entities to exist normally, to
Well, it's
attach to
highly,
us.
yes, it's highly beneficial for sure. And even entities that come along that are not our own individual entity that we've
Uh,
taken on, they're still beneficial for it. Now, you can have entities that actually we still benefit no matter what, but that can take us, try to take us off path. And then
mhm,
that would be like a virus that we take on that is actually compromises the physicality. It's still an experience,
mhm,
absolutely, but at the same time, it shifts from our healthful experience to a non-healthful experience,
mhm,
health-wise, whatever you want to call it. Um, so that may benefit for a period of time, but if you're going to dwell in there, then you're going to now create a whole path. For example, you get a disease of some sort, and say what we call cancer or something of that nature. It shifts your life
mhm,
tremendously because of that. So your experience of what you were experiencing before starts to go down a whole completely different path. Um, and there's a whole different consciousness that's accessed about that. And then when you take something like cancer, for example, there's a whole consciousness of that. It's like a huge data of information that exists in the collective.
mhm,
That the moment someone says, you got cancer and we got to treat it, you're now tapping into, especially if you give it power. If you choose
mhm,
to, nah, I'm going to have an individualized experience of what cancer is, then you localize your experience to what you want to experience. So, for example, if
mhm,
somebody wants to treat cancer through emotions, through natural ways of doing it without seeing it as a monster or something of that nature or something that's going to kill you or destroy you, you're not tapping into that collective consciousness. You're
Yes.
basically tapping into a smaller collective consciousness, and it could be your own consciousness where you're going to bring in stuff, information as you require.
Uh-huh.
So you filter everything that's coming in. But you say a typical person goes to the doctor and the doctor says, "Oh, we found cancer in your body." And if it triggers fears, they're directly now accessing that whole collective consciousness around cancer, which means compromisation, dying, suffering, going through
Mm-hmm.
chemo, radiation, going through surgery, going through all of this
Mm-hmm.
stuff, and all the fears associated, and all the memories of how it feels, and being sick, and loss, and all of that. That's a whole part. So in essence, if you redirect it and you choose to control it, then you're not tapping into that level of consciousness that's already there.
I wish to share with the viewers as regarding the cancer. We always have cancer cells in our body, and our body knows how to heal them and treat them as intruders, and the immune system knows how to deal with it.
Correct.
When we are having a cancer illness, that's when the immune system is compromised.
Hmm.
So
Correct.
if you look at you change the perspective to about cancer from uh, an infliction to an illness or weakness of the immune system, your whole perspective about the subject changes, and the way you express and the way you treat yourself changes.
Correct. Exactly. Exactly. And a lot
But
of times, even with that happening, it has an emotional connection. So if you're feeling a
Mhm,
certain way about life or your journey or certain events and situations, you will have the message transmitted to the body. Oh, do not address the cancer cells that are being developed on a regular
mm,
basis, and let it flourish for a period of time, so that in essence it creates a really strong experience and a
mhm,
shift, so that we can redirect ourselves. So there's other parts that can trigger it on. Like you have something has to flick on the switch or give the instructions to let it flourish. Yes, compromisation can happen because of a certain life stream that we have, and where we are compromising the immune system. But that is
mhm,
also a thought pattern and your observation, but it also has tied into emotions. But a lot of it can be just, you may have a good diet, you may have good regime or
mhm,
way of treating the body, but you're challenged emotionally immensely. You have a
mhm,
really difficult emotional component, and at that
mhm,
point, especially if you feel beaten up or feel that you don't want to live or anything like that, you're giving instructions to the body saying, "Oh, we have a wish to leave," sort of thing. Cancer's there. Why don't we just leave it? Turn off or tune away the immune system and let it flourish, because that'll be a good way to get leaving, or create such an intensity so it creates a shift. So you have that part of it coming in.
okay. Let's speak about regarding to ailments and physical challenges. Some ailments are developed, and some ailments, let's say, happens as kind of an accident. Okay? People get handicapped due to accidents. It can be
Mm.
work, it can be home, or whatever. Regarding that, um, it's always considered to be uh, part of the soul game.
Hmm.
But following our discussion, it's also be part of the entity game.
Correct.
It's very, I would say, entangled. Everything is entangled.
Correct.
A a tapestry of life.
Correct.
Um, like the ocean of life being, of cells. Everything is connected and can merge and remerge as something else.
Correct.
So in essence, there's no what we call a true experience. Everything is entity-based and related to the current drama. That's the trueness of it, of truthfulness or authenticity of it.
Right.
Regarding to that, what is the role, if everything is, let's say, relative to the observant point, what is the essence, the existence of the Akashic records? Are they part of the soul, part of the entity, or part of the both? And who records and what records recorded?
Well, that's a biggie.
It's a good time to stop now and start in the next video.
Okay.